a dev file. So you don't have to write it from scratch, which is good, right? We don't have to do this, so we can just look at how it's generated. If you remember, there was if you can see the project section, so the name of the project. Then if you look this, it doesn't start from Git, starts from a zip file contained inside the OpenShift dev file registry. We have a list of components, for instance, the plugin, the Visual Studio Code plugin for TypeScript, then the Node.js debug, and we have our Docker image, the container image that is actually running our commands. If you remember, we have two containers. So we have this container that will have some environment variable here and the run configuration. So we can also code this run configuration. If you want to give to our team, the run configuration command to just try, start, push, deploy, we can just hack this one and create the dev file for this one. So as an exercise now, what we can do is, adding some plugin to the workspace. For instance, if we want to add also from this view the OpenShift connector plugin, and this will contain Odo, for instance, OpenShift CLI, so all the plugin that we need. We can just click apply here. What happens, the workspace is going to be stopped and restart because you need to mount the new plugin in the pod. It's like a Docker volume. In Kubernetes is a persistent volume. You need to mount this, and it will give us the OpenShift connector plugin visibility when it started. So this is nice because from the UI, we can do everything as we want. But if we want to let our teammates to don't do this manually all the time, right? And maybe start from some Git repository and not starting, for instance, from a zip file. What we can do is just copy this dev file in our Git repo and then starting creating the new workspaces from the CodeReady Workspaces button that I can show you in a few moments. So the idea here is just to create the code for our developer. Let's say we want to put in this organization here, we want just to put this MongoDB example. And this MongoDB example itself is part of a list of example in Eclipse Che project. So you can look at all of them. If you go here in Che samples, very easy on GitHub.
Who has the dog? I'm sorry. Is that Unitali? Yeah. Okay, yeah. No worries. I'm just curious.
So this is the very big dog of my uncle that usually start singing at 5, 6 for I don't know which reason, maybe my voice. So I'm sorry about it.
Oh, no worries. I was just curious.
Yeah. As long as that's the person speaking, then yeah, nothing can be done about it really, other than take the dogs out.
No, don't bother with that. It's fine. Yeah. Like I'm used to having dogs around, right? Like my dog is right there. So yeah, right.
Well,
like,
so my dog goes off every day, 5 or 6 o'clock, starts barking, and I gotta go take him on a jog or something. He's predictable at least, but yeah, no big deal. Hey, well, since we've paused, we had a question in chat about setting memory limits on some of these environments. I think you mentioned you had a 2 gigabyte limit on the development environment, I believe. Is that correct?
So you can set the limits you can set the limits in the dev file itself. So for instance, in this container here for Node.js, there's a limit of 512 megabytes. Those are relevant to the workspace, to the container, right?
That's for the workload, though.
Right. Yeah, that's the workload. What about the...
At the upper level and OpenShift, you can set quotas for the specific OpenShift project. So this could be done either from the custom resource. When you install CodeReady Workspaces, you have those custom resources here. I'm not an administrator. Let me log in so I can show you.
The YAML that you showed for CodeReady Workspaces earlier, is that what you're trying to?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So that you could set limits on the amount of like workspaces that each individual user could have open at one time, so that you're not consuming too many resources for each individual user. You could do other things like memory limits for that environment.
Yeah, usually this type of question I would want to ask the person, like, okay, well, why are you trying to limit it, and who are you trying to limit it for? Are you on the operations side and you want to restrict too much usage by developers, or give developers a sensible ceiling that they shouldn't go beyond so they don't have memory leaks? Or or maybe you're the developer who is trying to prevent those memory leaks. I think they both need to have entry fields for folks. The ones that are more limiting per project are probably what I might use for administrative on the administrative side. But a lot of this, I think, is a lot of what we're showing today is related to the setup of CodeReady Workspaces. And so a lot of kind of what we're showing is a little bit more on the administrative side, I think. I think a lot of this could be reduced down if you were a average front-end developer who wasn't really focused on containers or Kubernetes. This could be boiled down quite a bit more.
JP Dade is like right in my heart right now, because he just said, yes, developers, trust but verify. I'm the ops guy. Those jokers will take it all if you want.
That's the motivation. Yeah. Okay,
right.
Cool.
So now we know, right? Like there needs to be some limit on the amount of capacity that the regular, user can consume as they're trying to break things, right? Like, DBAs is a good example, right? As they load in terabytes of database into memory potentially, right? Like that's fun to deal with as an ops person, I'm sure, right? Like is there a way to limit that?
Yes, you can limit, as we were talking about, from an operator perspective, or you can just give quotas to the project, right? Right. For instance, in our cluster here, there are some quota, not in this case, because I think I removed it, but you can also set up a trigger or on a webhook, admission control, and a webhook in OpenShift in Kubernetes that set up the limits range or the resource quota in the new namespace automatically. Nice. So this can be very helpful if you have a very large number of developer team and you want to just assign quota or limit the amount of resources that they can use, because they could hack the dev file, but they can't really hack the limit range or the resource quotas. Yeah.
That's going to be your answer, JP Dade, for probably all those problems, right? Like,
exactly.
You're going to need that on every project, right? Like that you're handing off to somebody, or every namespace that you're handing over to somebody, right? Like just like you should have resource limits in every container, you should probably have resource limits on things that you're handing to people as well.
Exactly. The CodeReady Workspaces custom resource is very granular in terms that you can say, okay, you can. The dog started again. Thanks.
I'm totally fine with that. I'm ignoring it at this point.
So you can tell, okay, you can use just two persistent volume per user, and the size can be maximum 2 GB per persistent volume. So those are settings you can put in the YAML file here, and you can drive the tuning of the CodeReady Workspaces instance on the storage side, for instance. This is for the administrator part. If we come back to the developer part, so as developer, if we come back to developer part, what we want to do is I want to give to my teammate, if you go to these Che examples, you can pick one of these. For instance, the one we select is this Node.js MongoDB sample. I want to give the capability for my teammate to create this automatically, maybe with the OpenShift plugin connector, without doing it manually. So how to do it? You can fork it in your organization. So I'm gonna fork this repository here. It's gonna be forked in our Red Wine software organization. And what I will do is adding a dev file here. So CodeReady Workspaces with a mechanism which name is factory will create the workspace automatically, just clicking on a button, and I can show you that it's really nice. It's really easy. So if you remember, we have just to go back to our dev file here. We have just to change the source to type to Git, not using the zip file, but everything then would be the same, would be good. So working in our fork, we just add a new file from the UI itself, dev file YAML. So it's a YAML file. We can copy the YAML file here, and we can start modifying it. So we say that this is Git, and we want to start, for instance, from this repository itself. So we can give the URL here of this one. So let me open this, and we can just copy this one. So location is gonna be this one. So we start with the project name is gonna be project something. So the name would be Node.js Mongo, for instance, office hours, for instance. We can just make.
So if somebody is doing this yourself, I mean, obviously make sure initially whenever you load CodeReady Workspaces, log in and get the sample, you created a Node.js sample. So create one for, whichever language. There was all those choices, right? So start off with that, and then you'll be able to easily switch out, this over here, right?
Exactly. So once you have the dev file here, the nice thing is to just add in the README a just click button that will start this automatically for you. So in order to do this, we can just copy another dev file sample, and I can show you, for instance, the one I was doing for the same example last time. So let's go here. Let's go to my repo. I already did it. Let's go to the same example here. So what I did is just adding this button here. When you click here, this will create the workspace for you using the dev file and using the factory service. So I can just copy this one. Going back to my example here, put it somewhere. We can just put here, for instance. And what you have to change is you have to upload this factory SVG, which is the image, or for this example here, we can just give the URL. Doesn't matter. We can just copy the URL address here from the other repo. Doesn't matter. But what you have to do is give the CodeReady Workspaces endpoint. So we have to copy the CodeReady Workspaces endpoint. In our case, is this one. So I'm gonna copy here, and you have to give also you have to point to this REST API endpoint, which is factory, accepting the URL of the repo containing a dev file. In our case, we just copy our repository here. So we have just to go here and copying the repository. Let's go back and put the correct URL here. HTTPS. Okay, so this is our CodeReady Workspaces factory file. We want just to click here and start a new workspace in our user. And so if you imagine one of these teammates, Chris or Ryan or Brian, can just click here. And when you click here, this gonna, if everything is fine with the syntax of the dev file, everything is fine with the configuration of CodeReady Workspaces, this will load the factory endpoint. So the factory endpoint will show you that we look at the dev file, initialize the workspace, and start the workspace. So here, I'm not allowed to start more than one workspace because the administrator didn't allow to do it for me. So I can do two things. I can relax the settings from the custom resource, or so restarting the application, or I can just stop this one because I don't need it anymore, and I can let the other one start for me. So we can just go back here and retry. We are logged in here as a normal user, so we can see the administrator developer view. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. So we can start again. So we stop the other one, so we can restart again. If there is any other settings, we can just relax this on the custom resource. We can put that we can start more than one workspace. And what happens under the hood again is that you create a pod in your server when this starts, and when this pod start, you can have the workspace starting in your environment for your user. So this is going to create again a new persistent volume. This is going to create a new persistent volume for us. When the persistent volume is okay, it's going to create the container for the workspace. So if we come back to the CodeReady here, now it's going. So this will load our dev file with the OpenShift connector plugin with the same MongoDB and Node.js code. So my teammate can start working using also the OpenShift integration with CodeReady Workspaces.
So
if we, yeah,
you could see, you probably can't see Natalia, but everybody else could see. So I went to that repo and clicked the button, and mine's also coming up now under my account.
You click the button.
I clicked the button. I clicked that button so that I could create this workspace.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and if now we have a very limiting settings for the workspace, so we can relax these settings. I did it for instance for a demo with Minikube and Eclipse Che, which is the same thing but using Minikube. So you can relax these settings in the custom resource, and you can say custom Che properties limit user workspace run count. If we do this in our workspace, and if anyone is not using that in the while, because the Che server will be restarted, then we can start multiple workspaces per project. So if you see, we can drive as administrator the limit count of the workspaces and give more freedom to the developer team if they need to open more workspaces. And usually they do, no? They want to test, they want to try. So now we started the workspace. If you remember, this is our CodeReady workspace. The code is the same, but this time the code comes actually from the Git repository. So we have a Git view here. If we do any change, we will have the possibility to review all the change we made with a live diff, everything that normal modern IDE is doing. Very cool that we have the OpenShift plugin integration and the Kubernetes one. So we have OpenShift plugin integration. This means that here we can create the application in OpenShift. We have the Kubernetes one, so we can navigate all the kinds and work on that. So we can really deploy this application and make it live. That linked before was just living inside the workspace. If we want to push inside OpenShift, we can just doing from here. It's going to create a Node.js application in our project in OpenShift, and then we can start deploying the thing. So the nice thing that each developer, me, you, Ryan, Chris, Brian, can work in its own project. So here I can work in my project, Ryan works in his project, Brian, Chris work in their project. When everything is fine, they test in their own project. Maybe they can use the Tecton plugin for CodeReady Workspaces. So we can have a Tecton plugin here, a Tecton pipeline, pushing the application to the platform. So this is going to be the flow. So now if you want, we can deploy the application inside OpenShift, or we can go through the talk about audio. I think the nice follow-up here is that when you use CodeReady Workspaces plugins for OpenShift connector here, so you have the connector. The connector gives you also a terminal inside your CodeReady Workspace. So here I have a terminal, which is different by my Node.js MongoDB terminal. And I have the audio. So audio, which is the command line for developers pushing application inside OpenShift. I have the OC command line. So I have all the settings that I need. I have also kubectl. I have all the settings that I need. Only thing I want to do maybe is log into OpenShift cluster with the right context, and I can verify that here I'm the right user, and I can maybe create a new project where to put my application. So this is very simple. You can also mix the strategy. For instance, this repo has already a MongoDB deployment file that you can deploy. So you can use this strategy to deploy in OpenShift, or you can just deploy from much better and easier. You can deploy your MongoDB instance from the developer catalog. It's straightforward. You just go here, you pick the database. In this case, it's going to be Mongo. You select also persistent database. And here you have to put all the settings needed by the application. For this application itself, if we want to see how it's made, we can just inspect the code. We can go inside the code and we can parse. For instance, we can see the Mongo URI here. It's user, password, MongoDB, very simple, no? But it's just for an example. So if we want to create this, we can create the database like is expected there. And when you do this, you can have your MongoDB database ready to host to serve the application that you're gonna actually push via OpenShift plugin connector. This is a nice follow-up because now we're creating through a Odo wrapper UI, which is the OpenShift connector, our application. So we can just create the application. We call it the guestbook. We can let this application start from the workspace directly. So we can start from this CodeReady Workspaces workspace. So we can tell, okay, grab the code from, for instance, from the Mongo.js, the Node.js MongoDB example. So this means that audio will go there and try to deploy the application, but we have to extract him and give the name of the component and the programming language. So we just tell to the OpenShift connector, okay, use this is a Node.js application. Please push it to OpenShift. When you push the application to OpenShift, this means that here you're going to create your application, and that this will connect to the Mongo application. You can do some grouping here for the application itself. You can play with the arrows and connect things. When the node application is ready, we can also access it from this plugin here. Nice that you can also create an OpenShift route, so you can access the application. If we call it, in this case, guestbook route, remember that you have always to push your change, and because Odo will push your change. This is a wrapper, UI wrapper for Odo. If everything is fine on the application itself, and we can review this by logs, if it could connect to Mongo with the right settings, for instance, if the connected to Mongo, yes. So if everything is fine, this is going to be our application, which is available not anymore from my workspace, but this is going to be available from my team in the cluster. So this is our application that I can work in my OpenShift environment. So I tested locally to the CodeReady Workspaces. Then when everything is fine, it's pushed automatically with the OpenShift connector to OpenShift. And thanks to devfile, if you remember, thanks to devfile, I could automate this and let the OpenShift connector be the default choice. So when Chris, Brian, Ryan, anything in this red wine organization want to start coding, they start from my latest change on the code and from a dev file using the OpenShift connector.
So did anybody put anything in the guest book yet?
Let me check if anyone put something in the guest book. I can put something. I can't click here. Let me say, okay, hello from OpenShift. And here we go. Now, great message from Chris. Yeah, it's working. Our inner loop, it worked out very good because we tested locally in terms of local workspace. Some good ops mate gave to us the possibility to create workspaces, persistent volume, have some storage, and have the CodeReady server, the multi-tenancy. So we implemented this developer loop here, and this was for devfile version 1. We know there is devfile version 2, and I'm gonna pass the ball now to Ryan that can talk to us about the version 2 that can be introduced by the new version of audio.
You bet.
11 minutes and 30 seconds. Go.
11 minutes. Oh man. We also have a couple we have a couple questions in chat as well that I wanted to get to. And we might have to save some of the devfile 2.0 for a later for a follow-up meeting. I can definitely give you the a recap of what I tried last night regarding Odo 2.0 and devfile 2. But
awesome.
Let's check in on chat real quick first, so we don't lose these questions.
Yeah, so there's a question around persistent volume groups, or persistent volume, and the containers for pods, NCRW. How many are needed? What's that look like?
Natalie, do you know very much about how many PVs are used per CRW session? Is it generally one PV per session, or is a lot of that backed up in the devfile registry?
Oh, so there are a couple of PV used, and we can show that actually. If I can start sharing my screen again. So we can,
JP Dade was mostly interested in figuring out budgeting per user. I think he has 100 persistent volumes available. I don't know how many developers he plans on onboarding, but if
Sounds like
CRW uses 2 or 3 PVs just on its own,
that's correct.
and then your database might also be using a PV. This MongoDB example we have. Just the workloads themselves may need PVs as well. So, I know I was successfully able to go into your GitHub example, click on the link to spawn my own hosted workspace, It booted up, and I ended up at first time it failed because I hadn't accepted the invite to the Red Wine Software GitHub org. So I had to go back. That was on me. I had to go back in and look at my group invites, approve that, yes, indeed, I'm a member of this GitHub org. And then I was allowed in to spawn my session. So security's working, which is good. And I was able to just directly one click boot into a hosted IDE that also had a terminal session in there as well, with Git and Odo and most of my tooling. So thank you, Natalie, for successfully onboarding me as a junior dev. That all worked. I know you had to do. Yeah, well, you had to do a decent amount of setup live on the stream today. We skipped over a little bit, and that's partially one of the other things that JP Dade in chat was asking about. What other work is involved in successfully rolling out this experience to a team? Because I'm not sure if our current documentation goes as far as connecting all the dots quite as well as what you've shown today, to the point where all they have to do is just click on the GitHub README and they're in business, right?
Like
that's
I think
awesome.
that like setup show is a great show, right? Like that whole process could be a show all by itself, and then you could incorporate devfiles v2, and we could do that next week if you want, right? Serena's down for v2.
Yeah,
unless you're going to talk about it right now.
We need to check in with Serena. I know Serena is. I'm not sure if she's around in chat.
She is in chat.
She had, I think, first rights to naming the topic for next week.
Absolutely. She
Being
says
from the
she's
future,
in.
she knows best.
She says I am in next week,
and
so
I don't want to
go.
stomp on if she already had a topic in mind. I don't want to overrule whatever she had in mind. But,
we've got, I mean, there's like 2 or 3 brewing right now. So, you know, Serena's been watching. We can talk and chat for sure. But we're not stepping on any toes. Serena's down for the cause, right?
All right. Well, yeah. Well, I don't know what if she has things in the roadmap that it's like, hey, this is about to roll out and I need to talk about it at the start of September. She's from the future and knows things that I don't know.
I know, but Serena also knows that she could get like future times for me if she wants to.
Yeah. All right. Well, definitely stay tuned for follow-up episodes. One thing that I can potentially demo, or I would challenge you to try out on your own, if you're up for it, if you're interested in learning more about devfiles, I posted a link to a GitHub issue at the very start of this, and I'm going to repost it in chat. That has a kind of the devfile 2.0 roadmap. The URL, it's github.com/devfile/API, and then milestone 1 was the rest of the URL there. And so that has kind of what's going into this devfile 2.0 release. I know Odo 2.0 has been released. I think this, or there's like a, let me double check on that. It may be in an alpha state. I think the latest one I grabbed was Odo 2.0 alpha. Yeah, it looks like we're still on alpha releases for 2.0, which would make sense because the dev files are still kind of in progress for 2.0. But Odo 2.0 is targeting these dev file 2.0 format, formatted dev files. So that's kind of what we're working on out into the future. Some of that UI wise won't be available until I think OpenShift 4.7 is where it's currently slated feature wise. So if you want to play
future projections,
all subject to change. But if you want to get a small taste of the future, this is what I did last night. I went into Katacoda. I picked the top right. Top right. My videos flip. My top right option was developing on OpenShift, and then the second after that, you get into a sub menu. You can pick developing with Odo is your second top right selection in there. That will automatically drop you into a Katacoda scenario that helps you get started with using Odo for the command line. It's different than using CodeReady Workspaces. But what I did was I went to the releases page, followed the instructions for the Odo release, copied in the latest Odo binary. So I had Odo v2, and then went ahead and followed along with the rest of the OpenShift Katacoda learning scenario. And it all worked perfectly. There was one extra command line flag I needed to add in. I needed to add in like a --s2y on the Java build. That was a new flag that's been added. But otherwise, Odo 2.0, the alpha, seemed to work fully backwards compatible with Odo 1.0. A new feature I saw was that you can configure Odo 2.0. You can run, I think, Odo registry add, and then you can add a dev file registry address. And then Odo will try to work against that dev file registry to load, store, save, and interact with those dev files. I was almost expecting one to get output to disk or something. I didn't see that, but it almost kind of makes sense architecturally to keep the IDE configuration somewhat outside of maybe the source code, especially if I'm dealing with microservices. I may want to decouple my IDE setup, especially if a lot of people tend to configure that per user. My IDE setup might not be your ideal IDE setup, so I don't know if it really belongs in a GitHub repo. But it's definitely nice having a link right in the README that I can click on in order to load an IDE, and then kind of hopefully merge in some of my preferences as well. So thanks again, Natali. Great demo today. We'll be back every week. Same time, same place. Thanks for joining us this week. Thank you to the folks in chat who had questions. And we'll be back next time as well. Anything else to close us off with, Chris?
Nope. Stay tuned for OpenShift Commons starting in 25 seconds.
All right.
Thank you all so much.
See ya.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.